Hi, welcome back, everyone. We are going to have another episode from our talks, Peter Ingle and myself, Mihai Algiu. And this time we'll just answer some questions that came our way from some people that are trying to study and apply the work, particularly the fourth way and non-dual path. And also, if you're watching this and you have some particular questions or interesting topics connected to the work, feel free to share as a comment here. All right, so we have a question that I'm going to do my best to summarize from someone, Michael. And yeah, the question is longer, but the essence of it is that so Michael is confused about this, is a dilemma about this situation. Yeah, in the fourth way system, we are encouraged to study about, to study the knowledge about our mechanics, meaning there is precise knowledge about the centers and subdivision of centers and how we are encouraged to notice in ourselves through self-observation how some particular impulse comes from the intellectual center, the instinctive center. So you get more precise and investigating the inner world in this way, and being able to notice certain unconscious mechanical behaviors in us, and then be able to also, let's so to say, label it. Oh, wow, this is the self-pity coming up. This is my power feature coming up. So yeah, that's what we are encouraged, especially at the beginning on the fourth way path, to observe ourselves and then to verify experientially some of the things, the map that we have been given. And so at the same time, as we are encouraged to do that, there is the danger that I am just noticing something for like 5 seconds, and then I stop noticing the something that I'm noticing. I stop noticing it, and I have associative analytical thoughts about it. And going into a little bit of what you call embroidery, trying to, so there's a moment of observation, there's an attempt to see in what drawer we put this observation. Then Michael says that, let's say, no, this is judgment, and then right away now also comes some other inner negativity, like some part of him is upset that he's judging, so he's judging himself for judging. So somehow he notices something, but it doesn't go further into self-remembering. Or so the question is, okay, how can we have the right ratio of observing mechanics in ourselves, putting into the right drawer, but then continuing the work, so we are not staying at the level of some kind of spiritual mind analysis. Yeah, this would be the first question. Anything is evoked in you from this, or some more practical tips?
What I hear in the question, Mihai, is that an instance where I start to observe, there's awareness. Awareness is perceiving something in myself, maybe a thought or emotion or my actions in relation to people, whatever it is. And then very quickly, because I'm still identified to a large extent, I can observe, but there's still a lot of identification, a tendency to attach to whatever I observe. And then as soon as I do that, even though I'm kind of know that I'm observing, now there's a reaction to what has been observed. So it's sort of like there's awareness, it perceives something, that perception comes back to awareness, but now that sort of projects as a reaction to what was observed. And so there's sort of this back and forth, observing, reaction, what's that? Don't identify, try to, and then going back in. And then all of these layers is just reactions to reactions of what is being observed,
Yeah.
if I understand Michael's question correctly. And so one of the things that comes to my mind is if this starts to feel chaotic, like there's just a lot of agitation and a lot of confusion and a lot of wild energy and I don't know what to do because it's this back and forth between observing reaction and then seeing the reaction and then not knowing what to do with that and having more thoughts about that reaction and so on. So one of the practical, all of this is going on inside of us when this is happening. So something you mentioned earlier when we were talking about this, Mihai, is the usefulness of now turning attention, awareness to your outer environment, the present. This comes back to what all the teachers and teachings have talked about and still talk about. Now it's a good idea to notice what is right in front of you. And you can still watch the mind activity trying to pull you in, but you keep your attention anchored in the present moment. And remember, too, even if I do something, if I say something a certain way to someone, or if I behave a certain way, and it kind of is shocking to me that, ooh, gosh, I did that again. I said that way, I acted that way, and there's disapproval of sorts inside myself about it. All of that's now happening in imagination. It's actually not related to right now. And so this thing about focusing on present, taking in and receiving impressions, being aware of nature or objects in the room, or sometimes people like to focus on their breath. I think it's sometimes helpful to go beyond the breath and actually get completely outside of oneself and really just realize we're in a world here. We're in this dimension, and it's rather uh, awesome and incredible and amazing and in many ways much more interesting than our thoughts and our agitation and our reactions to even our own behavior. But nevertheless, this can provide an anchor. If you cannot find the anchor in yourself, in the observer, as a place of, when we were talking earlier, you called it a place of refuge, Mihai. If you can't find this refuge, Uspensky called it the quiet place within. If you don't know the way to that place, as he said, or if you can't find your refuge there, and that's not your anchor is always the present. You're here, you can touch something in front of you, you can just look at what's in front of you, you can, but then of course you need to do it not in desperation, not out of desperation, but out of simple awareness. Because you can start getting agitated. You're observing all these things in yourself, and you're overreacting, and now you're getting kind of nervous and afraid and overwhelmed. And so you don't want to just leap onto holding onto a tree or looking at a flower. You want to knowingly, and the reason this is valuable because now it's almost as though the self-remembering awareness, the self-observation, what we see, and so what we're doing when we look outside ourselves is we're kind of opening that space up. And that can kind of calm things down a little bit. If we're so close to what we're observing and we're reacting, and it starts to become a mishmash, a psychological warfare, and it can overwhelm us. And so turning to the outer world can create a little more space, or sometimes a lot more space. Yes, that was my first
Yeah.
response to that.
That's interesting because he told me that sometimes this is happening, and I suggested something similar, and he said, "Oh, sometimes I just turn my attention towards my cat, and then I'm starting to pet the cat, and so yeah, this is some kind of following the principle of this is an important principle in psychology, consciousness, medical, physiological, energetic. This one, what we give our attention to grows. What we give our attention to grows. So it seems like there is a tendency in Michael to, so he notices, but then the attention goes from the observing presence towards this thought, this other thought, the reaction to the thought, the teaching. So it goes there and seemingly in order to find clarity. It's doing that in order to find clarity or resolution. But it's just is, a little bit like this metaphor with the looking in the reflection, and keep being in the reflection there and stirring the reflection in the water with the aim to get more clarity, but basically get more clarity if we come out with the face out of the pool of water.
Very nice, yes.
And so if Michael, now this refuge, or, instead of giving attention to the confused, contradictory eyes, we give attention. Ideally, if accessible, the highest way to transcend this is to give attention to the presence. So we give attention to the presence, which although we can't touch it and pinpoint it and locate it in the body, there is the feeling of presence, the sense of I am. And if that has been revealed to one, then that is the refuge. This is what you give the attention to. So self-attentiveness, which is from a whole other dimension. So as Einstein said, we can't solve, the solution to an issue is not at the same level with the issue. We need to go to a higher level, then the solution will come. So that would be, so to as soon as you notice this reaction and negativity about the reaction, to come back to the present and come back to the presence and stay as the presence, which is, I think you said it or somebody said it, it's a great absorber. Yeah, you said it. So the presence will absorb some of the static, and then sooner or later they will ensue clarity of what I'm dealing with, or even clarity of action. However, some people, especially somebody at the more like newer in the work, or medium student, intermediate or new student, one cannot access this presence. Somehow the route towards the quiet place within, which is what we are, is not clear. So then that's tricky, because the person cannot find refuge from the trickery of the mind into something. So then what I recommend, if one hasn't had the revelation of presence and the route there is not quick, that will be the highest, the best case. But if that's not possible, the second best case scenario, in my opinion and experience, is to give attention to the present, to just stay with reality, and less the internal eyes and more like, the seeing, the panoramic, the seeing, the hearing, the body on the contact with the earth. So, the Eckhart Tolle, the power of now, the being present to the present, that already will give a slight relief and will help one de-identify with the monkeys.
I think someone with a strong analytical mind, and this can be an intellectual proclivity. It can also be kind of an emotional impulse, that there's a wish to resolve. And so when we see contradictions, we see conflict in ourselves, or we're involved in some kind of inner turmoil, there's this overriding feeling, I need to resolve this.
Yeah.
And this is not coming from awareness. This is an impulse coming from the centers, as the fourth way says, the four centers, or if you like, from the mind and the body. There's an urge, an impulse to resolve, to calm the waters, as you were saying, Mihai. Ironically, then, thinking, well, I'll stir the water. I'll dive back in and I'll stir up I'm going in search of resolution. But in fact, it just makes it worse. It just keeps it feeds the very thing you're trying to resolve. And so you can have a thought in yourself and sort of, work on this a little bit and try to carry it with you on your belt or in your pocket. And the thought is just that says, you don't need to resolve what you observe. And that can kind of create some distance again. And it's sort of like watching a street fight and feeling, you need to serve justice by getting involved in the fight and sort it out and make everything better. You might get punched around a little bit in the process. You might get bloodied, but you feel like that's the right thing to do. But in fact, it's sort of like what we're talking about is sort of like standing back and just watching this little fight go on in yourself and not be so concerned about the outcome. So, but a simple thought, and you can develop, you can write it down. You can practice saying it to yourself internally. You don't need to resolve this right now. Or, step out of this just for 1 minute and focus on the present. And what's curious is resolution does come, but it comes via presence, not by actually winning the fight. Things do resolve. As you mentioned earlier, awareness is the great absorber, and it can absorb all this. You have to come to discover that on your own. Somehow, you have to find your way to this place of refuge in yourself, of quiet, where you're not so identified, even if it's only for 30 seconds. That's how it strengthens. That's how it grows. That's how it establishes itself as this refuge, a little at a time, a little at a time, even 3 seconds. But we don't want that. Our mind wants permanent resolution. Our emotional center wants permanent harmony, resolution, and oddly enough ends up finding itself in conflict because it's trying to sort of solve the problem, as you mentioned, solve the problem on its own level instead of getting above it with presence. This does not mean denying the fact that there's turmoil. This does not mean negating the turmoil, saying this shouldn't be happening, this shouldn't happen to me, I shouldn't have all that. No, it just means something sees it and is not going to get pulled along, doesn't want to get pulled into it. A little bit at a time.
Yeah, so there are so many elements in what you said and also what he shared. So I want to tease some of them apart for the benefit of other people too. So definitely to be informed and to observe what is called secondary negativity. These are people who are getting deeper and deeper into the work, into the knowledge. So they are getting inspired, they are trying to obey the tenets, the principles, to live according to it. There is emotional, spiritual investment into this applying, understanding these ideas, which is very good. But then, okay, now I'm present, somebody talks, this is what Michael was saying. And then he notices strong judgment eyes and dislike of some fellow practitioner or somebody out there. And then he notices that, and then right away it goes from noticing that, goes into judging himself now and being upset with himself for doing that and trying to stop it. So yeah, that's the secondary negativity. There is some upset comes as a result of having seen a mechanical behavior in oneself. So consciousness was more awake, noticed the mechanical tendency, and then now, instead of staying and having this, like in the sly man's pill, okay, this is this mechanical reaction. This is what it is. I'm going to use it for self-remembering. Yeah. Now, right away comes another reaction, upset with oneself, where consciousness is identified with it as if it's me, and this appears to be as if it's one of the good guys, this being upset with myself that I express negative emotions, or being upset with myself that I caught myself in a vanity or in power. So that is tricky because it seems to be coming from the good place, but it is not. It's just some trickery. So it's important to observe this in oneself and not to trust this other secondary group of eyes and to treat that as like as the other ones. So we are benevolent, curious observation, not rejecting, not judging. So that's a skill, that's a muscle to do that. So that's why I wanted to underline and to catch this in oneself, that it can be an alarm clock, and not to be like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. This is not good. Well, this is another I. There's no enough will in that I to decide I'm not going to do this anymore. The fact is, if there is the pattern of secondary negativity, it's going to come up again and again. So the right work is to know that and catch it and use it as an alarm clock for self-remembering. Yeah, so in this way, this again, the principle in the fourth way, using our tendency to fall asleep to wake us up.
And also, this is very normal. All of this, what we're talking about, in the sense of when you start to observe yourself. Because what has been happening for most of our life is we are in this imaginary picture we have of ourselves as a person. We feel a certain way about ourselves, and we're usually comfortable in it. Even if we're kind of miserable, we're comfortable in our misery. Everyone finds a place of sort of psychological comfort. It can be positive, it can be negative. It doesn't matter. And so what happens though is we are in this imaginary picture, then we start to observe from a more neutral place. And then right away we start to actually see how we're manifesting. And can be in direct conflict, direct contradiction to the way we've imagined ourselves. And then the reaction that comes is coming from our imaginary picture of ourselves. We think, oh, I see that I shouldn't do that. No, that's my imaginary picture of myself saying that or feeling that. So all of what we're talking about is wonderful grist for the mill. It's food for observation, because what we're really seeing is we're seeing this imaginary I, this imaginary idea we have of ourselves, reacting to actually seeing ourselves. And this is it. Now then the question is, how do you go beyond? How do you take the next step? How do you not yield to that, believe that, stop there, draw a conclusion? Because sometimes you can do this, even let's say you're in a religious group or some kind of group, and it's behavior based, and they say, well, don't do that, don't do that, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And then you find yourself doing it. And you go, oh no, I shouldn't do that. I won't do that. And then you sort of try to correct behavior. All that is your imaginary picture of yourself making an adjustment. It's adjusting itself to the circumstances to once again feel good about itself. So all of this is this psychological charade going on inside. And this is good. And so we could say to Michael, or to anyone experiencing what Michael's talking about, congratulations. This means you're starting to see yourself more objectively. And guess what? Your imaginary picture of yourself doesn't like it. And this is normal. This is right. And then this is where it can come into play, as Mihai is saying, this can become an alarm clock. When you feel this, you see yourself reacting and you think, this is me. This is the real I. I shouldn't do that. I won't do that anymore. I won't act like that, or I won't get upset that way anymore. No, this is opportunity to see that. Who is that that's feeling that way? Who's saying that? Now you're going deeper. You're moving past this secondary layer of negativity, as has been mentioned. And now the territory begins to open up. We're really going on this journey through our psychological world, which is usually we're shut off from our own presence, realization of our own awareness in the background, because there's a thicket here. There's like a jungle that's keeping it in the background unnoticed.
Yeah. And Gurdjieff was saying that any consented and chronic dislike, judgment, and negativity towards other people or oneself that creates a certain substance in oneself or a certain poisonous, toxic atmosphere. He even had a name for it. I don't have it now, a special name of this substance that accumulates when it's consented, chronic dislikes, judgment, negativity towards others or oneself, events that basically will, and that substance is like a dead, stagnant thing. So that's important to be informed, to know about this, and to, these are not just any regular eyes, I need to put gas, I need to talk to this thing. These are like poisonous, stagnant, and we are taught to observe this and to catch them as soon as they arise, and then to not consent to them, and to have this inner separation from them. We can't decide, hey, I'm not going to have this. There's not going to work like that. So we need to know that it's going to keep coming, because we practice them. We have this dark practice of having practice sleeping and dreaming in this way. So it will take some time to shift the train towards the other track. So Peter, you mentioned about this, something in the ego, in the just the centers, wants to find resolution. Yeah, I would go even underneath that. Is the why they want to find resolution? Because it feels unpleasant. It feels unpleasant, and basically the ego is trying to resolve the situation so we don't feel this anymore. So from one angle, it's an avoidance of reality, avoidance of what comes up here. And also this urgency that you mentioned, actually, Michael mentioned to me his work about something that may help other people. So let's say you are in a leadership position, or you work in a team and you have some role, and then I get an email. I get an email that is stirring from one of the team players, and then somehow this lands on, it's upsetting even to the feature of trying to control or trying to be seen as the savior or something. So there is a strong reaction to that email. And then what happens for many people is that we want right away to respond. We want to respond right away and to set the record straight, to tell them that they are stupid or tell them that it's not like that. And this can be done in a negative way, or can be done the same thing in a very professional way. But still, what's happening is there's reaction, identification, and then trying to respond. And that's a very good suggestion to know that, to basically put a little space there. When there's urgency, trying to send an email or text or urgency, the wisest course of action is to notice this urgency and to not respond right away. Give it some time. Let bake this a little bit.
You can also write the burning email and not send it. And then keep it for an hour or 24 hours, and then look at it, reread it, and you'll see it from a different place in yourself. And it might become more obvious. Oh, look at that. Because what's happening, you asking the question, Mihai, why? Why do we feel this, wanting this resolution? And there are several different answers to that question, but one is, you could say, because we want to be right. But that can be connected to other things. We want to be right because we then want affirmation that we are right. We want it from other people. And ironically, we don't have it in ourselves. We don't feel secure in ourselves. because of that, we don't have access to this refuge in ourselves, this silence of being, of this place of presence. And so we don't know ourselves as that. We're not established in that, in the realization that that is what we really are, and that nothing can touch that. But instead, we are involved in this feeling of identity. We want confirmation and affirmation, and we're always looking for that in ourselves. And we feel, if I can resolve this, I'll be back at feeling secure in myself. But that's the ego. That's this imaginary picture looking for a form of security, which is really insecure, because the next little thing can topple it. And so it can, and we don't want to face the tension. There's tension when people don't understand us, or they disagree with us, or we feel they disagree with us, because they're not affirming our point of view or our decision. And we don't want to face the tension there. And this gets into a whole nother aspect of this work in the fourth way approach, which is to not be afraid of that, to use that as a lever for further deeper observation when we feel this discomfort. This is not bad to feel it. And then, of course, the other thing is, a lot of people, what do they do to get rid of this discomfort? They express negative emotions. It's a huge outlet it's a pressure, it's a relief valve. And this work involves actually closing that valve and voluntarily, consciously accepting the tension inside and using it for observation. But it needs to be used for something. You can't just sit there and boil inside. You don't want to do that. That's a misstep in this process of non-expression of negative emotions. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. And it's okay that people don't agree with you. It's okay that not everybody likes me and all of that. But back to my original point is, sometimes it can be helpful. Write the raging email back. Justify yourself. Accuse, blame, criticize, but don't send it. Wait and reread it later and then see how you feel.
I mean, this is like, even a slogan like try to respond and not react. So that's what we are talking about. But from the point of view of awakening and consciousness, and I was speaking to him like from multiple points of view. So from the point of view of the work and awakening, to go and try to resolve it right away, that goes against the work. Now, from the point of view of the actual outer situation, it's also very likely that's not going to be very wise, because it comes from this emotional reaction rather than taking into account the totality of the situation and all the people and their aims and my aims, and so it's very likely, although it comes from the impulse to set it straight, to be right, to put the ducks back in a row, but actually the very email is going to create more ripples, and it's not going to be probably the most professional, wise solution. And okay, what you said, then we have this tension or friction, internal friction, discomfort, unpleasantness. So here's what Michael would need to get better at being with this tension. And you were saying not just to be with it like that, but I think there are two things we need to do with this. I mean, first of all, it can be used, there's this discomfort, friction, that I use this energy that wants to leak towards redirecting this energy that into vividly present for longer and longer. This will be one approach. But another approach, or you have to be both approaches at the same time, is that if there is such a burning tension, it's important to investigate this, not just as a tension, but there are more hidden dogs or skeletons in there. Dogs is like Gurdjieff's term for unconscious, problematic sleep. So yeah, to identify what are the wrong attitudes or the faulty attitudes, and to okay, when to investigate. The person sent me this email, then we might have subconsciously, well, this means that they don't respect me, or this means that they are trying to take over for me, or this means I won't get the credit. So we need to find out, there's some belief there, some thought that it's a little bit in the other room, and we are just getting the turmoil of the energy. So to investigate, what does it say there? What old story of mine might be lurking in that reaction? But then not, again, now not stay and psychologize it and put it into a right drawer. We still need to do this, stay in the present, and this is in the present and from the presence.
Is this when we are engaging with other people in this respect, there's really two things going on. You could say, I mean, there's a lot of things going on, but we could break it into two and say there's what's happening inside me. And that's a lot of what we've been talking about. What's happening inside me? Why do I feel this conflict? What am I trying to resolve? What is the tension? Where's this feeling of myself wanting to be right, wanting to be liked, wanting to be respected? All that's inside. And a lot of this falls into the category of what the fourth way calls inner considering, which is a good subject to investigate. It's a big subject. It's a big part of our life as human beings in a condition of what the fourth way calls being asleep. It's our identity sort of revolves around this in this arena, going in circles and circles and circles of inner considering. But anyway, there's that. And then the other thing that's going on is with the other person. What's going on with that other person? Because you see, they're in exactly the same situation. They are caught up in their own jungle. They're caught up in their own features, in their own urges and impulses, and need to be liked, and need to be right, need to be approved. And so there are many things we can also learn to do from a psychological point of view relative to other people. And it can see, but professionals learn these methods, and they're not necessarily more conscious. They've just been taught these techniques. For one, you can compliment someone. You can keep saying their name when you're talking to them. You can say, "Oh, that's a great idea. Can you tell me more about that? Tell the team more. Let's flesh out your full idea here. And by the way, would you be open to some comments or suggestions about your idea?" You can turn it around. There's so many things. But we're not into just these techniques for the sake of calming the waters or playing tricks on other people. Although some of the things I just mentioned can be extremely useful, especially in a business environment, let's say a professional environment. But what we want to come back to is a place where we really see what's going on from inside, both in ourselves and in the other person or other people, and not be so identified, not be so caught up in this engagement that's going on. Because you see, people are desperate for identity and desperate for being liked and approved and respected and being seen and being recognized. And it's a very strong impulse in human beings. And when you start to see that none of that's important and none of that matters, well, you can do a couple of things. You can leave your job, but that's not always practical. You can just get out of that arena. It's a ridiculous arena. Or you can see, no, this is my arena. It's my professional. It's how I earn my keep and so on. And then you can learn to play a little bit in those waters, but without always needing to be the one who's right or needing to come out on top. Sometimes the best manager, I forget, I heard something lately. Most people don't want to be managed. They don't want to be managed. They want to be, I forget what it was. It wasn't led. It was kind of inspired, kind of given the autonomy and freedom. And so a good manager can be someone that actually lets people manage themselves. But sometimes we're that type of person. We got to manage everyone. We got to have full control over everything all the time. And if we don't, we get angry, we get upset, we get frustrated. And then we start to blame and accuse and criticize. And so there's a lot here to talk about, both from a psychological point of view and from the point of view of consciousness, awareness. What is our aim here? We don't want our consciousness to get sucked into these interactions. But what happens is we get sucked in again and again and again, and usually in the same way, from the same point of view. So we're back to observing all this first, and then really start asking the question, what's the best ladder for me to climb out of identification with here?
Yeah. So yeah, what you said is there's a core foundational suggestion from Gurdjieff about our practice not happening in an ashram or monastery, being in an office with all kind of people. So what you said is like what Gurdjieff said to internally, so externally play a role, yeah, is in the team, in the board, externally play a role, and internally don't identify, yeah. This is not like to be, I'm manipulative and I'm tricking people, I'm not authentic. It's not to be taken like that. It's more like to be taken as, I guess there's a, Jesus said something, give Caesar what belongs to Caesar and give God what belongs to God. You know, when he was asked about, you know, paying taxes and, you know, stuff like that. So give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. So show up as a put together, polished kind of persona, a role that is the best way to be in this situation. There are 20 people, there's pressure, you know, some way that also is consciously created. It's not just happening. So it's a consciously play a role, yeah, and internally don't identify. And yeah.
It's interesting because that really covers the whole idea of being master of oneself. Because this idea to be master of oneself means both the self of awareness mastering itself, not losing itself in identification. That's true self mastery. But at the same time, what we're talking about, it also means now awareness being cognizant enough and not being identified such that it can steer this cart of this person, the role you're playing, and you can master the circumstances by adjusting to the circumstances, but doing so without identification while still playing your role on stage. Yeah, this is beautiful. This is very difficult, nuanced, what we're talking about, and yet this is what we are really after, or this is what we'll find ourselves in that position as we go forward. And it can become like a dance, and it can become almost like a game too, if you don't take it too seriously, but a serious game whereby you're still playing your role, but you're not identified internally.
And to do that in that situation for Michael, in order to play a role consciously, which will be benefiting the actual situation, the outer
Yes.
situation, and it will him passing a test in the work of not identifying, not going with the feature. So in order to do that, to play this role, he needs to catch and not consent to the mechanical role that comes up, the Michael that right away wants to put it all straight and to tell them how I know better and that, you know, it's not correct. Yeah, so because if we don't play a role consciously, then the unconscious persona plays out, you know, and it's running us. Well, I have some more, but I think it goes in another topic, so I suggest we stop here. And And although it addresses Michael, I have seen all of these things that Michael said in myself. so,
Yes, yes, haven't we all?
yeah. All right. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
And yeah, feel free to ask us any questions about the work or topics of interest. We will consider them. Merry Christmas.